Apparently, Redfall was so bad that Arkane knew that it was going to bomb, and they even wanted Microsoft to cancel the game when they were acquired? Let's talk about that here today. Hey, I'm LittleBobby here with 5-9 Gaming Direct. Today we're going to be talking about this bombshell, but not really, article by Jason Schreier over at Bloomberg, inside the making of Redfall, Xbox's latest misfire. But before we get into that, make sure that if you're brand new here, you hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and leave a like if you enjoyed this video. If you do not like this video, hit the dislike and let us know in the comments what you didn't like about it. All right, so if you're a person who's been around this channel for a little while, you know that we don't have the highest opinion of Xbox, and the reason is simply you see what happens. Look at Halo, look at Redfall. Redfall is one of the worst reviewed games of the year. It was literally saved by Gollum, which is a train wreck for the ages. But if that game didn't come out this year, Redfall would almost certainly be the worst reviewed AAA game of the year. And it really should never have come down to a monumental disaster like Gollum saving Redfall from being the worst game of the year. So if you didn't know, Redfall was made by Arkane Austine, and Arkane Austine made some awesome stuff, right? Obviously, Arkane made the Dishonored franchise, which is incredible. The immersive sim genre was really pushed forward by that franchise, and Arkane is kind of known for that. They continue that on with Prey, and even more recently, Deathloop still had a lot of the immersive sim stuff, but a lot of people kind of didn't like that it was made a little more mainstream. Personally, I thought Deathloop was great. It was kind of like light immersive sim mixed with light roguelite stuff, and I thought it was fun, very stylish and all that. Some people who were longtime Arkane fans did not really care for it because they said it took away from the immersive sim genre, and I can understand that if that's what you're really into the things for, because I love the old Arkane games too, and the immersive sim thing was a little lacking in Deathloop, but because it was a roguelite, like, I like that genre, so I thought mixing them was really cool, and I love the art style. That absolutely won me over. But there's an article from Jason Schreier that came out June 1st, 2023, that talks about Redfall and the fact that the devs at Arkane knew that it was not going to be great. So going through this article, it says, over the years, Microsoft Core-owned video game developer Arkane Studios has cultivated a reputation for releasing games that are beloved by fans, yet don't sell very well, such as Prey and Dishonored 2. By contrast, the studio's most recent game, Redfall, has achieved something new. It managed to be at once a commercial and critical disappointment. Redfall, a multiplayer shooter set on a fictional Massachusetts island full of vampires, debuted on May 2nd and was promptly panned. Fans and critics slammed the game's bugs and shortcomings. On review aggregation website Metacritic, Redfall has earned a paltry 54 out of 100, ranking it among the year's worst reviewed games. And again, if Gollum had not come along, Redfall would absolutely be the worst reviewed game of the year, at least from a AAA studio, in my opinion. It seems there's an issue with every element, reviewer Tariq Musa wrote. In the end, Redfall feels unpolished, underdone, underwhelming, and uncomfortable. The high-profile dud extends the pain this year from Microsoft Xbox division, which has struggled to produce hits and watched as its planned $69 billion acquisition of Activision Blizzard Inc. has gotten tripped up by US and UK regulators. Joost van Drunen, a video game analyst and professor, said Redfall's failure highlights a significant gap between Microsoft's lofty aspirations and its actual products, which also calls into question Microsoft's ability to establish long-term franchises on its own strength rather than buying them outright. Microsoft declined to comment. In a recent interview with the YouTube channel Kinda Funny Games, Xbox boss Phil Spencer said that Redfall's review scores were significantly lower than our internal metrics, suggesting the lackluster debut may have caught the company off guard. So we're going to take a quick pause from reading through this article to talk about what has been discussed here so far, right? We know that Microsoft is really counting on this Activision Blizzard acquisition, and we know Phil Spencer has said, well, that's not really like our whole plan, but it's just going to kind of help us with our plan. I don't think that's true. I think at this point they are absolutely relying on Call of Duty because we haven't seen too much. Now, there has been some cool stuff, like hopefully rumored or at least hinted at by Microsoft. They had that little Twitter post that kind of hinted that maybe Fable is going to be showed at their June showcase, which I would love to see that. Fable was a great little RPG series back in the day, and I hope that they can really make something worthy of that name and get it out. But we also know that Phil Spencer, doesn't believe that, just one great game is going to bring people back. And I think he's right about that. And I think that quote was taken out of context in a lot of ways, which not very cool. I think what he meant was that Starfield alone is not going to make people invested in Xbox. And that is true. The thing that Xbox needs is to bring a number of high quality AAA games out and make it a consistent thing. And if they do that, they're going to start getting some market share back, which is what they really need. All right, but back to this article. But to the makers of Redfall, the mediocre reception was no big surprise. The project suffered from unclear direction, frequent attrition, and a perennial lack of staff, according to more than a dozen people who worked on the game, speaking anonymously because they were not authorized to discuss it publicly. A spokesperson for Redfall's publisher, Bethesda Softworks, declined to comment. Development on Redfall began in 2018. At the time, ZeniMax, the large privately held owner of Bethesda Softworks, was looking to sell itself. Behind the scenes, the company was encouraging its studios to develop games that could generate revenue beyond the initial sales, a popular trend dubbed games as a service, which was taking off in the late 2010s thanks to lucrative hits like Overwatch and Fortnite. According to people familiar with the process, ZeniMax was strongly urging developers at its subsidiaries to implement microtransactions. That is, recurring opportunities within games for players to spend real money, say, outfitting their characters. Although this was an absolute mandate, several ZeniMax franchises such as Fallout, Doom, and Wolfenstein would soon release new versions incorporating online multiplayer and monetization options. At Arkane's headquarters in Austin, Harvey Smith and Ricardo Barre, respected industry veterans, were tapped to serve as co-directors of Redfall. Following the commercially unsuccessful release of its sci-fi shooter Prey a year earlier, leadership across the company wanted to make something more broadly appealing. What eventually emerged was the idea to make a multiplayer game in which users could team up to battle vampires and perhaps pay for occasional cosmetic upgrades. All right, so if you're reading this like I am, basically this game started as a live service, and we've had many discussions, especially Talon, because Talon does not believe in live service games, even though he does play Destiny, and we played Destiny together. We played Destiny together last night when we were talking about this article. Now, the thing about a live service game is that you have to have a clear idea of how you're going to make it engaging for the player, and not many companies are able to achieve this. And sometimes it takes a while, and sometimes they can't figure it out at all. So let's think about it. Fortnite and Destiny 2 are probably the two most popular live service games, and they took a while to figure it out, and people don't remember this. When Fortnite came out, it was a PvE tower defense game, and the fact that PUBG had a really successful battle royale, they were like, hey, our engine is very agile, and we make the engine. We know how to pivot. So they went from making the tower defense save the world Fortnite mode to making Fortnite Battle Royale, and it took off. Destiny 2 started off as a sequel to Destiny, and Destiny was kind of popular, not nearly as popular as it is now, but it took them a while because they kind of went the competitive route, making it more for like the PvP crowd, because that very vocal minority somehow convinced Bungie that they were the ones who mattered, which was just a mistake. Because as much as I love PvP in Destiny 2 when it's working properly, it doesn't compare to the fact that I play the game for the PvE. I play to fight space monsters and stuff, and PvP kind of will keep me busy between big content drops. But even then, if I'm not digging PvP at the time, I'll just go play other games. I come back for PvE. I don't come back for PvP. And I think that goes for about 80% of the Destiny 2 player base. But knowing that Redfall started this way makes it clear Arkane Austin and Arkane in general is not a live service company. And while this may not have been a quote-unquote absolute mandate, it certainly feels like ZeniMax, at least at the time, was like, yeah, we're going to be doing this. We're going to make it happen. So seeing that the follow-up to Prey ended up being scheduled and thought of initially as a live service is very telling. It's just wanting to cash in on a trend because Destiny 2 had come out and started turning things around in 2018, and Fortnite was the biggest game in the world at the time. Everybody's trying to cash in on this live service craze. But you cut to 5 years later and people are tired of it because every other game since has tried to do the live service thing. And again, a lot of them have failed. Look at the Avengers, look at Anthem. And man, I actually loved the Avengers and Anthem. I still will turn on the Avengers every once in a while, and I've been really wanting to play Anthem recently. It's just one of those things where I like them, but they failed. There's no question that they failed. A lot of people did not enjoy them. And for both games, there was no clear plan as to what you were trying to make and what you were trying to do over the long term. And we're seeing Redfall fell under the exact same thing. Let's continue the article. Since its founding in 1999, Arkane has become known for games called immersive sims, single-player experiences in which players strive to overcome obstacles in multiple ways, from combat to stealth maneuvers. Yet from the start, Redfall was pitched to staff as a multiplayer Arkane game, which some team members said they found confusing. Whether the sort of gameplay that the studio specialized in would be technically possible in a multiplayer environment was an open question. Developers under Smith & Bear said the two leads were outwardly excited, but as the project progressed, failed to provide clear direction. Staff members said that over time, they grew frustrated with management's frequently shifting references to other games such as Far Cry and Borderlands that left each department with varying ideas of what exactly they were making. Throughout the development, the fundamental tension between single-player and multiplayer design remained unresolved. Smith & Bear did not respond to requests for comment. Now, this section has to do with what I said earlier. They did not have a clear vision. They didn't know exactly what they wanted to do. And this has been a problem like in the games industry in the last 10 years. There's been a lot of companies that have just seen real steep declines because instead of just making a game with a solid idea, they're chasing a trend of something they're not really familiar with and genres that they're not creatively driven by. Not everyone wants to make a looter shooter. But the article continues, Arkane was also perpetually understaffed, said people familiar with its production. The studio's Austin office employed less than 100 people, sufficient for a relatively small single-player game like Prey, but not enough to compete with multiplayer behemoths like Fortnite and Destiny, which are developed by teams of hundreds. Even additional support from ZeniMax's Wisconsin-based Roundhouse Studios and other outsourcing houses couldn't fill the gaps, they say. Morale at Arkane suffered. Veteran workers who weren't interested in developing a multiplayer game left in droves. By the end of Redfall's development, roughly 70% of the Austin staff who had worked on Prey would no longer be at the company, according to people familiar, as well as Bloomberg analysis of LinkedIn and Prey's credits. So this goes back to what I just said. Not everybody wants to work on a multiplayer shooter, especially a looter shooter, right? Looter shooters have been done to death, and very few of them have been really great. Anthem tried to be a looter shooter. We saw Avengers effectively turn into like a looter shooter, but with melee combat. And I think a lot of devs are just tired of chasing that trend. Look, Destiny does it great. The Division does it really well. Not as good as Destiny, but still really well. Borderlands is the king of looter shooters still, in my opinion. Wonderlands is a fantastic game, and I really wish they would make more content for it. But that doesn't change the fact that people do not necessarily want to work on live service looter shooters trying to chase that Destiny trend, because it's been about 10 years and nothing has come along to knock Destiny off of its perch yet. Continuing on, the article says, filling vacancies became a challenge. Within the industry, ZeniMax had a reputation for paying lower than average salaries, and convincing some progressive or moderate video game developers to move to Texas could be difficult due to the state's conservative social policies. Since Redfall wasn't yet announced, the studio couldn't describe its details to prospective employees, a predicament that exacerbated the staffing issues, sources familiar with the process said. Arkane wanted to hire recruits with experience on multiplayer shooters, but the people who applied were by and large looking to work on single-player immersive sims. Meanwhile, on September 21st, 2020, Microsoft purchased ZeniMax for $7.5 billion. It was an ambitious move that gave Xbox control over lucrative franchises such as Doom and Fallout, as well as the upcoming Starfield, a role-playing game from the makers of the wildly popular The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Although adding Arkane's portfolio wasn't the main goal, it was a potentially nice bonus for Microsoft, particularly if Redfall turned into a hit. The acquisition gave some staff at Arkane hope that Microsoft might cancel Redfall, or better yet, let them reboot it as a single-player game, according to sources familiar with the production. Instead, Microsoft maintained a hands-off approach. Aside from canceling a version of Redfall that had been planned for rival Sony Core's PlayStation, Microsoft allowed ZeniMax to continue operating as it had before, with great autonomy. Microsoft Spencer would later say in the Kind of Funny interview that Xbox didn't do a good job early in engaging Arkane Austine. To me, this is just indicative again of Microsoft's biggest issue is their management of their studios. I've said this so many times. They have such great IP, and yet every single franchise, aside from Forza, has just seen very, very swift declines in the last few years. And here we see that their main thing was like, we're going to take this game away from PlayStation. They're not getting it. Otherwise, do whatever you're going to do. We don't care. And if they had gone in and perhaps sat down with the dev teams, sat down with the leadership and gone, okay, what are we working on? And how's it looking? How are you feeling about the project? These are all things you should be doing when you acquire a new business, kind of see where everyone's at, how morale is. The fact that they didn't have any idea about the morale or the issues that they were being faced beforehand kind of screams to me that they didn't do their due diligence as well as they should have. Because it's clear here that almost the entire studio just did not want to work on this project, and they were basically praying that Microsoft would just cancel it and go, hey, just end this. And if I'm Phil Spencer, I walk in there and I see this project personally, I'm gonna go, you know what? Let's take this off the table. Live service by 2021, when the sale had gone through, was already declining in a big way. And even now, we still see that a lot of live service games don't make it. They're not going. The ones that still try do it. And that's one of the things that we talked about last week about we're concerned with Sony going after so many live service games, especially considering that gamers as a whole are kind of getting tired of live service games. The article continues on. Still, expectations remained high. During a 2021 press conference, Xbox positioned the Bloody Vampire Extravaganza as one of the company's big upcoming releases, dramatically revealing it at the event's show-stopping finale. Yet, during the final frantic months, the remaining Arkane staff found themselves stretched thin, and the debut date was pushed back from Halloween 2022 to early 2023, and then eventually to May 2nd, 2023. Along the way, Smith and other leaders assured the staff the game would get exponentially better once the final art was implemented and the bugs were fixed, promising that Arkane magic would manifest at the last minute as it had with previous games. Other developers such as Electronic Arts' Bioware have been widely criticized for using similar language. Yes, we heard that language with Anthem. Bioware thought the Bioware magic was going to come around and save Anthem. And unfortunately, that's just not how it works. Now, if you're someone who's worked on creative projects, right? I've done scores for short films and movies and things like that. I know from experience that a lot of times everything does come together at the last minute. That does happen. And I'm not saying shouldn't do that. But the fact is that when I worked on those projects, we had a leader. We had the film's director who had a clear vision of what he wanted his film to be. And when I was doing the music for it, we hashed out my vision of the score with his vision of what he wanted the film to be. We made some compromises and we made sure that we worked together to make it the best possible product at the end. That's what happens. It wasn't the fact that we were sitting there going like, oh, I guess we're never going to get this done, because you can't do that. You can't just go, oh, it's going to be just a bad product, but you know what? Maybe it'll come together at the end, I guess, hopefully. That's not how it works. And me personally, I'm really tired of hearing studios go, you know what, it'll be fine, it's just gonna come together and people are gonna love it. Another thing that really frustrates me is that Microsoft said they had internal scoring for this game that thought it was going to be double digits higher than it did review, and that was when it was in the 60s, which means they thought this game was gonna get into like the mid 70s And they were okay with that. They're not striving to be any better than that. Basically, Microsoft acting like those people in college who would say, C's get degrees, instead of actually trying to strive to be the best in their field and learn properly what they're doing, right? We have PlayStation, sure, on a shaky back foot after their showcase, but they've been delivering consistently for years. And if you look at Nintendo, they get a lot of grief, but Nintendo just put out a game that professional developers are asking, how is it even possible that you made this game with such little space being used and with the hardware that it's being put out on? That is striving for excellence. And the fact that Microsoft was like, you know what, this game, if it gets a C, that's totally fine. It's our first $70 game. It's our first AAA game in 18 months. It's okay if it's just like a middle of the road game. We don't really care that much. It's going to go on Game Pass and it'll hopefully get some people to subscribe to check it out. That's not good. That shouldn't be the way of thinking, and that shouldn't be the level of expectation that you set with your brand. Game companies need to stop expecting everything to just work and people to just buy the product, because gamers have shown they're done with that kind of thing. If a game comes out and it's bad, they're just not going to care, or they're just going to go, this is awful. And Microsoft as a brand, you need to hold yourself to a higher standard. Sure, Windows, people don't have an option. I don't have an option. I can go to Best Buy and buy a PC and it's going to come with Windows unless it's an Apple computer. But if you're expecting to compete in the games market, especially against two huge juggernaut behemoth companies like Sony and Nintendo, don't do it by just buying everything. Because if you just buy everything and you put in that same like, hey, C's get degrees attitude into it, it's just going to fail. Now, hopefully they did say that they have stepped in with Starfield sooner and it's going to be a better product. Time will tell. But my fingers are crossed, because Xbox really needs a win, but they also need a culture shift. They need to understand they cannot just put out stuff and Game Pass makes it okay, because that feels like it's the attitude. The article concludes that in the end, Redfall never coalesced. Several people who played the game in 2021 were shocked to see how little ultimately changed. The final glitchy product felt to some critics like a poor compromise between single-player and multiplayer ideas that failed to please fans of either type of game. Harvey Smith recently said in an interview with the website Eurogamer that early on, he pushed back against the compulsory inclusion of an in-game store, but people who worked on the game said the remarks didn't square with how things played out. For the first 3 years, Redfall had a significant microtransaction plan in place. Only in 2021, with games as a service growing more controversial among gamers, did Arkane finally scrap its unwieldy in-game monetization plans. Recently, Microsoft has said that Arkane will continue working to improve Redfall, but its rough launch only raises the pressure for the rest of the ZeniMax lineup, particularly Starfield, which is scheduled to arrive in September. In the interim, the industry will be watching to see what lessons Microsoft has learned. The disappointment of Redfall evidences Microsoft's desperate need for attractive content if it is going to beat rivals Sony and Nintendo at their own game, analyst Van Drunen said. My hope is that it will inoculate Xbox from repeating a similar mistake in the future. And that's exactly what I said. Microsoft is simply going, hey, we're just going to try and buy up everything that we can. Microsoft has infinite money. They're the second or third wealthiest corporation on the planet. They could just win through a war of attrition. They will never run out of money as long as people are using computers. But that doesn't mean that they're going to be a good gaming company, because gaming company requires dedication, creativity, and a willingness to invest in a vision, which they have proven that they do not really have. Phil Spencer says that his vision is to make sure that Xbox is everywhere. That's literally just a saturation plan. When it comes to creative vision, Microsoft is basically bankrupt, and I've said this for a long time. I would love to see them really buckle down and go, look, we need to find some good talent. We need to make sure we keep that talent, and we need to grow these studios, make sure that people feel secure in their jobs. They absolutely need to end that contract policy that they have, because that just leads to devs leaving and then not wanting to come back, because they go, well, if I come back, I'm just going to be on a contract, so why bother? And I hate to say this, but the thing that makes a gaming company great is when a group of people are able to work together towards a singular goal under a singular leader who has a vision that they are all dedicated to. And that seems to be what Microsoft is missing. It looked like it was missing from Halo. It looked like it was missing from Redfall. And now we're learning that it absolutely was missing from Redfall. But this article really does shed a lot of light. It shows us that Arkane really had a bad thing under ZeniMax, and then Microsoft acquiring them didn't make it any better. If anything, it made it worse. Because now they had new leadership that didn't care as much as the old leadership, which is, to me, just insane. But what do you guys think? Do you take it as personally as I do that Arkane Austin kind of is just gone now? 70% of the studio leaving means we're not going to get the same quality games from that studio for a long time, if ever. A lot of those people who had the knowledge of how to build those systems and how to do it well are gone. Let us know in the comments down below. Again, I'm LittleBobby here with 5-9 Gaming Direct. Make sure you leave a like if you made it this far. Subscribe if you really want to see more videos from us here. Ring the notification bell if you do subscribe. And if you dislike this video, let us know in the comments down below why and leave a dislike. That helps us kind of train ourselves, our personal algorithm, to make sure that we're bringing you the best possible content. Thank you again so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon.